girls who kept giving him second chances. When did he stop asking for them? Story 1. I used to call them second chances like I was being noble. The truth? I was bargaining with my own dignity. Ethan cheated the first time at a work conference. He cried in my kitchen, forehead pressed to the cabinet like a kid in trouble. Please, I'll do therapy. I'll delete everything. I'll prove it. I believed him because I wanted my life back. The second time wasn't even dramatic. I found a flirty thread on his iPad while looking for a recipe. When I asked, he didn't deny it. He sighed like I was interrupting his day. It didn't mean anything. Can we not do this right now? That's when I realized the begging had changed into impatience. Still, I stayed. Third chance came after he forgot my birthday dinner because he was helping a friend. The friend's name was saved in his phone as a pizza place. When I confronted him, he did the apology script again. Same words, same wet eyes, same promise to be better. The moment he stopped asking for chances, the day I finally said, I'm done, he didn't chase me. He didn't cry. He didn't even stand up from the couch. He just shrugged, paused his game and said, okay, not wait, not please, just okay, like I'd canceled plans. And in that quiet, I understood. He hadn't been fighting for me for a long time. He'd been fighting for access. Story 2. I gave Marcus so many second chances that my friends started calling me a charity. The first mistake was money. He borrowed a little for rent, then a little for car repairs, then a little for a short-term business thing. Every time he promised to pay me back, he'd kiss my forehead and say, I hate that I'm like this. You deserve better. Then I caught him out at a bar with a girl from his gym. He claimed she was just a friend. I said, then why did you tell me you were at your brother's? He replied, because you overreact. That sentence was the first crack. But I still gave him another chance because he showed up the next morning with flowers and a speech about trauma and learning how to be loved. The moment he stopped asking for chances wasn't cheating again or another lie. It was smaller, meaner. I had a big interview and asked him to be there on time so we could leave together. He promised. Morning came. No Marcus. I called. Texted. Nothing. I panicked, called an Uber, and got there barely breathing. Later, he strolled into my apartment with food and said, relax. It's not like you died. I started crying and told him how abandoned I felt. You know what he did? He laughed once, just a short exhale, and said, you're so dramatic. This is why I don't tell you stuff. No apology. No pleading. No, please don't leave. He didn't ask for another chance because he'd already decided I'd never stop giving them. And the most humiliating part? He was almost right. Story 3. I kept giving Jason second chances because he was amazing in public. He'd post sweet captions, hold my hand at parties, open doors, call me his person. People would tell me, you're so lucky. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, he turned into someone who measured love in control. If I went out with friends, he'd sulk for 2 days. If I wore something he didn't like, he'd say, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying you look desperate. Then he'd make it up with a romantic night and a promise to communicate better. The first chance was after he screamed at me for not answering my phone fast enough. The second was after he read my messages by accident. The third was after he made a joke in front of his friends about how I was clingy, and everyone laughed while my face burned. I finally decided no more chances. I packed a bag while he was at work and left a note. Nothing dramatic, just, I'm choosing peace. He called once. I didn't answer. He texted, seriously? Then, you're really doing this? Then, whatever, that whatever hit harder than any insult. When he stopped asking for chances, it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he didn't want to admit he had anything to fix. If he begged, it meant I mattered. If he dismissed me, he could pretend I was the problem. The last message he sent was a selfie of him at a bar with the caption, thriving, and that's when I knew. He hadn't lost me. He'd replaced me in his head months ago. Story 4. I used to think love meant endurance. Like if I could just hold on through his rough patches, I'd earn the version of him I met at the beginning. Noah was sweet when he wanted to be. He'd cook for me, kiss my forehead, talk about our future. Then he'd disappear for days when he was stressed. I'd get the silent treatment, then the grand return. Long paragraphs, apologies, promises, and sometimes tears. I gave him second chances after he ghosted me on our anniversary weekend. After he flirted with my coworker at my own birthday party. After he told me I was too much when I asked for basic communication. The turning point came when I stopped being soft about it. He canceled plans again, last minute, because his friends invited him out. I said calmly, I'm not doing this anymore. If you want to be with me, show up. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then he said, so what? You're giving me an ultimatum? I said, no. I'm giving myself a boundary. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He didn't do the dramatic apology. He just looked relieved, like he finally got permission to stop pretending. Okay, he said. We should probably end it then. That was it. No fight. No begging. No, I'll change. He stopped asking for chances the moment I required effort. And the cruel part? He looked lighter walking away, like I'd been the weight, not his behavior. Story 5. I kept a literal list in my notes app, reasons to stay. I also had a list called things he promised. The promises always sounded so sincere. I'll stop drinking. I'll stop yelling. I'll stop liking her photos. I'll stop calling you names when I'm mad. Each time he'd say, just give me one more chance. And I would, because he'd act like the version of him I loved for exactly long enough to reset my hope. Then one night, he came home late, smelling like cigarettes and someone else's perfume. I didn't even yell. I just said, I know. He laughed. Not nervously, confidently. Know what? I showed him the screenshot I'd gotten from a girl I didn't even know. Him texting her the same pet names he used on me. I expected begging, crying, some performance. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and said, so what do you want? A medal for catching me? I whispered, I want you to care. He shrugged and said something that rewired my brain. I'm tired of apologizing to you. If you leave, you leave. That's when he stopped asking for chances. When he realized I was finally collecting evidence instead of excuses. I packed a bag with shaking hands. He didn't block the door. He didn't chase me down the stairs. He just called after me, almost bored. Don't be dramatic. I turned around on the landing and said, you're right. I'm not. And for the first time, he looked confused, because my second chances had been his safety net, and I just stepped off it. Story 6. The first time Leo forgot my birthday, he showed up the next day with a cake and puppy eyes. I'm an idiot. Please, just one more chance. The second time he forgot something important, it was my graduation. He texted proud of you while I was taking photos with my family. I cried in the bathroom and still let him back in because he blamed work, his anxiety, his childhood, anything but his choices. I kept handing him second chances like receipts, proof I was understanding. Then one night, I found a note in his jacket pocket from a girl at his office. Not even romantic, just bold. Had fun. Next time, no excuses. I confronted him, shaking. He didn't panic. He didn't beg. He just stared at me like I was a pop quiz he didn't study for. I didn't do anything, he said. I replied, you're lying, and that's when it happened. His face went blank, like the mask finally slid off. Okay, he sighed. Then break up with me. That was the moment. No, please don't. No, I'll change. He didn't even try to convince me I was wrong. He simply handed me the job of ending it. Like he was tired of maintaining the relationship, but didn't want to look like the bad guy. He stopped asking for second chances the second he realized I wasn't a person he had to keep. I was just a door he could keep reopening. Story 7. I gave Adam so many last chances that my best friend started timing how long he behaved. Her record was 9 days. His pattern was always the same. Mess up, cry, promise therapy, do one sweet thing, slip back. He lied about texting his ex. He forgot to tell me about a weekend trip. He flirted in front of me and told me I was insecure for noticing. Every time I said I was leaving, he'd go soft. Baby, please. I'm trying. Don't throw us away. Then I got sick. Nothing life-threatening, but scary enough that I needed someone to show up. I asked him to come with me to the clinic. He said he couldn't. Big meeting. My mom drove me instead. That night, he posted a story from a rooftop bar. Drinks, music, laughing. When I called, he answered annoyed. What? I'm out, I said. I needed you today. He paused, then said, you're alive, aren't you? I didn't scream. I just went quiet. And in that quiet, he realized the old tricks weren't working. So he tried a new one. Acting like I was irrational. Don't start, he said. I'm not doing this, I whispered. So you're not even going to ask me to stay? He exhaled like I was exhausting. Why would I? You always do. That was it. He stopped asking for second chances the moment he felt sure I would keep granting them, until I finally proved him wrong. Story 8. I thought my boyfriend Ryan was bad at communication. Turns out he was excellent at it, when it benefited him. He'd disappear for hours, sometimes a whole night, then come back with a perfect apology. I panicked. I got overwhelmed. I didn't want to drag you into my mess. It sounded mature. It sounded honest. So I kept giving him second chances because I believed love was patience. One day I accidentally saw his group chat with his friends. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't panicking. He was bragging. One message punched me in the throat. She's mad again, LOL. Give it 2 days, she'll fold. Another, just say you're working on yourself. They eat that up. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just smirked and said, why are you snooping? I said, You're laughing at me. He shrugged. You're choosing to be hurt. The second I stopped crying and started speaking calmly, his eyes changed. He wasn't scared. He wasn't sorry. He looked bored. So are we done? He asked, like he was confirming a dinner reservation. That's when I understood. He stopped asking for second chances because in his head, he didn't need them. He'd already turned my forgiveness into something automatic, like a subscription he could cancel and restart whenever he wanted. Story 9. Mason cheated emotionally, not physically. At least that's what he swore. It was just talking, he said. I never touched her, so I forgave him, because I didn't want to be the girl who threw everything away over texts. Then I found out he'd been rewriting our relationship to her, telling her I was controlling, that I didn't understand him, that he felt trapped. I asked, why would you say that? He stared at me and said, because it's how I feel sometimes. Sometimes. I gave him another chance after he promised to cut contact. He lasted a week. I caught him again, and this time he didn't even flint. You're checking? He asked, disgusted. That's insane. I said, you promised. He rolled his eyes. I promised to try, and there it was, the loophole. He wasn't breaking promises. He was trying, which meant failing was acceptable. I told him I was done. I expected tears. I expected panic. He just nodded and said, honestly, yeah. This is getting toxic. He stopped asking for chances the moment he found a way to make my boundaries sound like the problem. If he could label me the villain, he never had to beg. He could walk away feeling righteous. And he did, leaving me with the mess and calling it my fault. Story 10. I was the cool girlfriend. I hated that title, but I wore it like armor. When Dylan came home at 2 a.m., I pretended not to care. When he liked thirst traps, I joked about it. When he forgot plans, I said, it's fine. I thought being low maintenance would make him choose me. Then he crossed a line so obvious even I couldn't laugh it off. He invited his ex to his birthday dinner. Not by accident, on purpose. He told me 20 minutes before we left. I didn't want to tell you earlier because you'd freak out, he said. At dinner, she sat across from me like she owned the table. Dylan kept making inside jokes with her. Everyone watched me smile like I wasn't bleeding internally. On the way home, I finally snapped. Why would you do that to me? He didn't apologize. He didn't plead. He didn't say, I'll never do it again. He just said, I'm not going to be with someone who can't handle my life. I stared at him. So you're not even going to ask for another chance? He laughed softly. For what? You knew who I was. That was the moment he stopped asking for second chances. When he realized I'd trained him that I'd swallow disrespect to keep the relationship alive. I got out of the car at a red light and walked the rest of the way home. He didn't follow. He just drove off, like my pain was traffic, not consequences. Story 11. I stayed with Nate because he was almost the guy I wanted. Almost honest. Almost kind. Almost ready. The first second chance was after he screamed at me in a parking lot because I asked who he was texting. 5 minutes later, he was crying into my shoulder, saying his dad used to yell and he didn't know how to stop. I forgave him because he sounded self-aware. The second chance was after he disappeared for 2 days. When he came back, he said he'd been clearing his head. I later found out he'd been at a cabin with friends and a girl he called just a buddy. By the third chance, my body reacted before my brain. My stomach dropped every time his phone lit up. I started checking his tone like weather. Sunny Nate. Storm Nate. Tornado Nate. Then one afternoon, I told him calmly, I can't do this anymore. I need stability. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't even look surprised. He smiled, small and tired, and said, yeah, I figured. That smile broke me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was relief. Like he'd been waiting for me to finally pull the plug so he wouldn't have to. I whispered, so you were just letting me carry this? He shrugged. You kept choosing it. And that's when I realized when he stopped asking for second chances. The day he noticed I would do the hard work for both of us. He didn't need to fight for me. I was already fighting against myself. Story 12. I gave Chase a second chance after he cheated only once. He begged, swore he hated himself, sent me paragraphs at 3 a.m. He even let me track his location. I felt terrible for needing it, but I stayed. For a month, he was perfect. Flowers. Dates. I'm so grateful you didn't give up. Then little things started slipping again. His phone turned face down. His password changed. When I asked, he got offended like I was betraying him. One night I saw a new name pop up on his lock screen. Sid Blackheart. I didn't even accuse him. I just said, who is that? He smirked. A friend. Relax. My voice shook. Why the heart? He rolled his eyes. Because she's not insane. I stared at him, waiting for the usual pivot. The apology, the begging, the please don't leave. Instead, he stepped closer and said, look, I'm not doing the whole forgiveness circus again. Either trust me or don't. Forgiveness circus. He stopped asking for second chances the moment he got tired of performing remorse. He didn't want a clean slate. He wanted permission to be messy without consequences. I walked out without yelling. Behind me, he called out, "See? This is why I didn't tell you." And I realized he wasn't losing me. He was freeing himself from pretending he deserved me. Story 13. Eli didn't cheat. He didn't hit me. He didn't even lie that much. That's why it took me so long to accept I was still being destroyed. He was a master of tiny punishments. If I upset him, he'd need space for days. If I cried, he'd stare at the wall like I was background noise. If I asked for reassurance, he'd say, "You're exhausting." Then he'd come back sweet. A hug from behind. Coffee in the morning. I'm sorry, I just get overwhelmed. I kept giving him second chances because it wasn't one big betrayal. It was 1,000 paper cuts. The moment he stopped asking for them was the day my grandmother died. I called him, voice breaking, asking if he could come over. He paused and said, "I don't know if I have the emotional capacity for this tonight." I said, "For what?" "To sit with me," he answered, totally calm. "I can't be your therapist." Something inside me went cold. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just said, "Okay." He blinked. "Okay?" I repeated. "Okay. You don't have to." For the first time, I watched him realize his silence wouldn't punish me anymore. He didn't ask for another chance because he couldn't. You can't space your way out of abandonment. And he knew it, so he tried to flip it. "Wow," he scoffed. "So you're just giving up?" I looked at him and said, "No, I'm finally putting you down." Story 14. I was the girl who believed in potential. That was my toxic trait. Ben had big dreams and small follow-through. He'd promise he'd stop drinking so much. Promise he'd stop flirting. Promise he'd stop forgetting our plans. Every time I caught him, he'd fall apart. "I'm scared you'll leave. Please, just one more chance." Then I got pregnant. I told him in my bathroom, hands shaking, expecting panic and then, at least, loyalty. He hugged me so tightly I almost believed it. "We'll be a family," he whispered. 2 weeks later, he didn't come home one night. I called 20 times. He finally answered at 6 a.m., voice thick with sleep. "Where are you?" I cried. He sighed. "At Jake's." "Stop interrogating me." I found out later, Jake's was a girl's apartment. When I confronted him, I expected begging, because now it was serious. Now there was a baby. He didn't beg. He looked at my stomach like it was an inconvenience and said, "I'm not ready for this life." I whispered, "So you're not even going to fight?" He shook his head. "Why would I?" "You'll figure it out. You always do." That sentence ended everything. He stopped asking for second chances the moment responsibility showed up. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted a girlfriend who cleaned up his mess while he stayed a boy. And the scariest part? He walked out like he was the victim. Story 15. I used to think he was afraid of losing me. Turns out he was only afraid of losing control. Drew would mess up, then chase me. Dramatic calls, showing up at my door, tears, promises. He loved the cycle because the ending was always the same. Me comforting him for hurting me. One night, after he accidentally deleted our shared photos during a fight and then blamed me for making him angry, I didn't comfort him. I just sat on the couch and said, "I'm done." He froze, like I'd turned off the music at his favorite club. "Stop being dramatic," he said. I replied, "I'm not. I'm leaving." He waited for the part where I softened, where I cried, where I asked him to reassure me. When it didn't happen, his voice got sharper. "So what, you want me to beg?" I said. "I want you to respect me, but you don't." That's when he stopped asking for second chances. Not because he didn't want me, because begging would mean admitting I had power now. He grabbed his keys and said, "Fine, go. You'll regret it." I stood up and opened the door for him. He paused on the threshold, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe I wasn't chasing him. For a second, I thought he'd crack and plead. Instead, he smirked and said, "Good luck finding better." Then he left, loudly, slamming the door like a final insult. And in the silence after, I realized he didn't stop asking for chances because he was done with me. He stopped because, for the first time, he wasn't the one in control of the ending. Story 16. I used to pride myself on being understanding. With Caleb, that meant translating his bad behavior into something I could forgive. He'd cancel plans last minute and say his social battery died. He'd flirt with strangers and claim he was just friendly. He'd disappear during arguments and come back like nothing happened. Every time I tried to leave, he'd suddenly become poetic. "Please don't give up on us. I'm learning. I just need time." Then I got offered a job in another city. My dream job. I was glowing when I told him, expecting him to be proud. He stared at me and said, "So you're just going to abandon me?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. That week, he picked fights nonstop. You've changed. You think you're better than me. You're selfish. I kept trying to calm him down, kept trying to prove I still loved him, kept offering chances like peace treaties. Finally, I said, I need you to support me or I can't do this. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just said, then don't. And that was the moment he stopped asking for second chances. When my life got bigger than him. He wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of me growing beyond the version he could guilt and control. He didn't fight for us. He just waited for me to shrink. So I packed my boxes instead. Story 17. No one warns you that second chances can turn into a personality. With Jordan, I became the girl who explained his cruelty to other people. He's under stress. He didn't mean it. He's had a hard life. Meanwhile, he treated my love like a resource he could drain. He'd insult me and then claim it was a joke. You're so sensitive. He'd accuse me of cheating whenever I went out. I know how girls are. If I cried, he'd stare like I was embarrassing him. The first time I caught him on a dating app, he begged. He actually got on his knees. I swear it was curiosity. I hate myself. Please. I gave him another chance because the begging made it feel real. The second time I caught him, he didn't kneel. He laughed. You went through my phone again? That's crazy, I said. You promised. He shrugged. And you promised you'd trust me. I finally said, I'm leaving. He nodded like I was ordering coffee. Okay. No chase. No tears. No please. That okay was colder than cheating. Because it meant he wasn't afraid anymore. He'd stopped asking for second chances the moment he decided I was stuck. The begging wasn't love. It was maintenance. Once he believed I'd stay, he didn't need to perform remorse. And I realized my biggest mistake wasn't giving him chance after chance. It was teaching him he'd never face consequences. Story 18. My friends hated Owen. Not in a dramatic way. More like a quiet dread whenever his name appeared. He always had a reason. He missed my mom's birthday because his boss called. He forgot my sister's wedding date because he was overwhelmed. He didn't come to my hospital visit after my car accident because hospitals freak him out. I kept forgiving because every apology sounded so sincere. He'd hold my hands, look me in the eyes, say, I'm going to do better. Please don't leave. Then I got into a minor accident again. Nothing huge, but enough to shake me. I called him, voice trembling, asking if he could pick me up. He said, I'm in the middle of a game. Can you Uber? I thought he'd realize how bad that sounded and backtrack. He didn't. I said, Owen, I'm scared. He sighed. Babe, you're always scared. That's when it clicked. He didn't actually care about fixing anything. He cared about ending discomfort. His discomfort. When I told him I was done, he didn't beg for another chance. He said, so what, you're punishing me? Punishing him. Like my pain was a tantrum. He stopped asking for second chances the moment he believed my needs were negotiable. And the worst part? I'd been negotiating them for years. Story 19. I gave my ex, Sam, endless chances because he was the king of grand gestures. He'd mess up, lie, flirt, vanish, and then show up with flowers, a letter, a playlist titled Us. Everyone would say, he's trying so hard, and I'd feel guilty for still hurting. But one day, I realized the gestures only happened when he was losing access to me. Not because he understood what he did. The moment he stopped asking for second chances was the day I got smarter than the script. He forgot my important event again, and I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, I'm disappointed. He blinked, like he didn't recognize the emotion. No anger to argue with. No tears to comfort. Just disappointment. He waited a beat and said, so, are you breaking up with me? I said, I think I already did. In my head, a while ago. His face hardened instantly. Not sad, annoyed. Wow, he snapped. So nothing I do matters? I said. It matters when it's consistent. He laughed like that was ridiculous. You want a perfect boyfriend? I said. I want a safe one. He didn't ask for a chance after that. He just stood up and said, good luck, because once he saw he couldn't win me back with a performance, he stopped performing. Story 20. I stayed with Theo because I believed in communication. He used that word like a weapon. If I accused him of flirting, he'd say, let's communicate, and then spend an hour explaining why my feelings were irrational. If I cried, he'd say, let's communicate, and then list all the ways I triggered him into being cold. Every time I tried to leave, he'd say, don't throw us away. I'm willing to work on it. Give me a second chance. Then I discovered he'd been messaging his ex the entire time. Late night, checking in, private jokes, little heart reactions. When I confronted him, I expected the usual speech. Instead, he did something worse. He smiled like he'd been waiting for this moment. Well, he said, calm and smug, I guess we'll have to communicate about why you invaded my privacy. I stared at him. You betrayed me. He replied, And you broke trust first by snooping. That's when he stopped asking for second chances. Because he had found a way to make me the offender. In his mind, I didn't deserve apologies. I deserved a lecture. I said, I'm leaving. He nodded and said, if you walk out, don't come back. He thought it was a threat. It wasn't. It was finally the first useful thing he'd said. Story 21. I kept giving Aaron second chances because he was always almost caught. Almost guilty. Almost sorry. He'd hide his phone, then claim he was planning a surprise. He'd come home late, then swear his car battery died. He'd forget my messages, then say he didn't see the notifications. Every lie had a little soft pillow under it so I wouldn't break my heart on impact. The first time I tried to leave, he cried so hard he threw up. Please, I'll do anything. I can't lose you. I stayed because that looked like love. 2 months later, I found out he'd been DMing a girl from his hometown. I brought it up gently, ready for tears again. He didn't cry. He stared at me and said, are we seriously doing detective work again? I said, you promised you'd stop lying. He laughed, like I was adorable. I promised I'd try. Then he leaned back and said the sentence that ended it. You're not going anywhere. You never do. He stopped asking for chances the moment he believed I was predictable. The begging wasn't remorse, it was strategy. Once he felt safe, he didn't need to perform panic anymore. I walked out that night. He didn't follow. He didn't call. He only texted once the next morning. So you're really doing this? Not, I'm sorry, not please. Just surprised that his safety net had finally snapped. Story 22. Milo didn't cheat. He did something sneakier. He trained me to doubt my own reality. If he flirted in front of me, he'd say, you're imagining it. If he insulted me, he'd say, you're too sensitive. If he ignored me for days, he'd say, you're needy. And then, when I was crying, he'd soften his voice and go, I hate seeing you like this. Give me another chance. I'll be better. I kept believing him because every chance came with a brief honeymoon. Breakfast in bed, sweet messages, his arm around me in public like a badge. The moment he stopped asking for second chances was the day I caught him lying and didn't argue. He told me he was at his cousin's. I saw him on someone's Instagram story at a club. I showed him the screenshot, calm. He blinked and said, so? What do you want me to say? I waited. The truth. He shrugged. I don't owe you explanations. I felt my whole body go cold. You used to beg me not to leave. He smirked. That was when you were unpredictable. Unpredictable. Like I was a wild animal he'd tamed. He stopped asking for chances when he decided I was controlled. And the instant he said it out loud, it was like a spell broke. I didn't debate. I didn't cry. I just packed. He watched me with a bored face and said, you'll be back. That line didn't hurt anymore. It just told me how little he understood. I wasn't leaving to punish him. I was leaving to remember myself. Story 23. I gave Devin a second chance because he always had witnesses. If he hurt me, he'd fix it publicly. A bouquet at my job. A handwritten note on my car. A long post about how grateful he was for me. Everyone would swoon. And I'd feel like a villain for still being angry. Behind closed doors, he was different. He'd call me ungrateful. He'd twist every argument into my fault. You made me act like that. If I threatened to leave, he'd become the sweetest man alive for exactly 48 hours. Then my dad got hospitalized. I was exhausted, scared, running on coffee and panic. Devin promised he'd come with me to visit. He didn't show. I called. He answered, irritated. I'm busy, I whispered. My dad might not make it. He paused and said, what do you want me to do? Sit there and be sad with you? That was the first time he sounded annoyed by my pain. When he came home later, I asked, do you even care? He stared at me like I'd asked something childish. I'm not good at this emotional stuff, he said. And honestly, you're a lot right now. I waited for the begging, the dramatic speech, the performance for my forgiveness. Instead, he said, if you can't handle me, just leave. He stopped asking for second chances the moment the situation wasn't about him. He could handle being sorry when it got him praise. He couldn't handle being supportive when it asked him to give something real. I left the next morning for the hospital alone. He didn't text me once, and that silence told me more truth than any apology he'd ever written. Story 24. With Vince, I kept thinking, once he feels secure, he'll treat me better. So I poured love into him like it was medicine. He'd blow up over nothing. Traffic, his boss, a wrong order, and I'd absorb it. If I cried, he'd apologize later. I'm working on my temper, he'd say. Please don't give up on me. I gave him chance after chance because he sounded like a man who wanted to change. Then we moved in together. That's when he stopped asking for second chances. The first time he yelled in our new apartment, I packed a bag and said I needed space. I expected him to panic. He leaned on the counter and said, where are you going? I said, my sister's. I can't live like this. He smiled, actually smiled, and said, You're not leaving. Your name's on the lease. My stomach dropped. I realized the begging had been temporary. A bridge. He only needed my forgiveness until he got me tied down. Financially, logistically, emotionally. Once he felt I couldn't easily walk away, he didn't need to act remorseful. He could act entitled. I stared at him and said, "Watch me." He laughed like I was being cute. "You're being dramatic. You'll cool off." That was the moment I understood. He didn't stop asking for chances because he improved. He stopped because he thought I was trapped. I walked out anyway. I slept on my sister's couch. I untangled my life one painful thread at a time. And the first time he finally begged again was only when he realized I had actually left. Story 25. I kept giving Lucas second chances because he was my best friend. That label is dangerous when the person uses it like a shield. He'd flirt, and when I got upset, he'd say, "You know I'm just social." He'd lie, and when I caught him, he'd say, "I didn't want to hurt you." He'd disappear, and when I cried, he'd say, "You're the only one who understands me." So I stayed. Again. Then my friends planned a surprise birthday dinner for me. They invited him weeks in advance. I dressed up, did my makeup, sat there smiling while everyone whispered, "He's coming, right?" He never showed. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. My friends tried to distract me, but my heart was pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. At 1 a.m., he finally answered. Loud music in the background. "What?" he shouted. I said, "It was my birthday dinner." He paused, then said, "Oh, right." I waited for the "I'm so sorry," the begging, the desperate scramble to fix it. He just sighed and said, "Babe, you're making this a bigger deal than it is." I felt something inside me snap. Clean, quiet, final. "You used to beg me to stay," I said. He laughed. "Because you used to threaten to leave." That's when I understood when he stopped asking for second chances. The day he learned my love was loyal, even when he wasn't. He didn't need to ask. He assumed. I hung up, blocked him, sat in the dark in my birthday dress, and for the first time in years, I didn't give him a chance to explain. Story 26. I used to think second chance meant forgiveness. With Carter, it meant letting him rewrite history until I apologized for being hurt. The first time he said something cruel, "You're not exactly a prize, you know." He followed it with, "I'm joking. Don't be so insecure." I swallowed it, then forgave him because later he brought ice cream and kissed my forehead like he was comforting a child. The second time, he flirted with a bartender right in front of me. When I confronted him, he said, "I'm just being nice. You always embarrass me." I tried to leave. He stopped me at the door, eyes glossy. "Please, I'll do better. I hate when we fight." So I stayed. The moment he stopped asking for chances was the night I caught him calling me crazy in a group chat. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, "Do you even like me?" He stared at me and said, "Why do you need to make everything so deep?" Then he added casually, "If you're going to be like this, maybe we shouldn't be together." No begging. No panic. No wait. Like I was the problem for noticing the disrespect. That's when it hit me. He didn't stop asking for second chances because he was confident in us. He stopped because he was confident in me staying. He thought my fear of being alone was stronger than my self-respect. So I proved him wrong. I picked up my keys, walked out, and didn't look back. Because he'd already shown me who he was when he thought he didn't need to try. Story 27. With Dylan, the apology always came with a timeline. Give me 2 weeks. Just get through this month. After this project, I'll be different. So I kept giving him second chances because I kept believing there was a finish line where he'd suddenly become the man he promised to be. The first chance was after he missed my cousin's wedding to go partying with coworkers. The second was after I found lipstick on his collar, and he told me it must be from hugging people at a bar. The third was after he called me dead weight during an argument and then apologized with flowers like words didn't count. Then my car broke down late at night. I called him, shaking, standing under a streetlight. He answered half asleep. "Can you come?" I asked. He groaned. "Babe, I have work tomorrow. I'm scared." He paused and said, "So call someone else." I waited for the "I'm sorry" for the scramble, for him to realize how cold that was. Instead, he said, "I'm not doing this guilt thing. You're always making me the villain." The next day, he acted like nothing happened. I asked, "Do you even care about me?" He shrugged. "You're being dramatic again." That's when he stopped asking for second chances. When he stopped caring whether he deserved them. He no longer begged because he no longer feared consequences. I left, and he sent one text. "Good luck out there." Not a single please. Just a goodbye that sounded like a dare. Story 28. I gave Marcus second chances because he was broken. I thought love could fix him if I was patient enough. He'd ghost me when he was spiraling. He'd snap at me and then blame his depression. He'd accuse me of not supporting him enough. and I'd bend myself into a pretzel trying to prove I wasn't abandoning him like everyone else. The first time he cheated, he sobbed in my lap. I hate myself. I don't know why I do this. I stayed because he looked like a wounded animal. The second time, he didn't sob. I found a receipt for a hotel. I asked, "Tell me the truth." He stared at me and said, "I told you I messed up." I said, "So you're not even sorry?" He sighed. "I'm tired of being punished forever. Either accept me or don't. Accept him." That's when I realized he'd turned his brokenness into an identity, an excuse that came with unlimited forgiveness attached. He stopped asking for chances because he decided apologies were optional. If I loved him, I was supposed to tolerate it. I finally said, "I can't." And he replied, "Flat, then leave. No begging. No tears. Just dismissal. Like my love was a subscription he didn't care if he canceled." I left. And the next day he posted a quote about choosing peace. Like I was the chaos. Story 29. Evan's second chances were always about optics. In public, he was charming. He'd pull out my chair, call me queen, post photos with captions like my whole world. People thought he worshipped me. That made me doubt myself when things felt wrong. Behind closed doors, he was careless. He'd ignore me for hours, forget important dates, and blame me for overthinking. If I cried, he'd say, "Stop trying to start drama." I kept giving chances because the good parts were so loud. Everyone saw the flowers and the captions. No one saw me begging for basic respect. Then I found out he'd been flirting with a girl from his gym. I confronted him, expecting panic. He smiled and said, "Are you trying to ruin my week?" That was the moment. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say please. He didn't ask for a chance. He just looked annoyed that I dared bring consequences into his life. I said, "So you're not even going to fight for us?" He shrugged. "I'm not going to argue about something that didn't matter." Didn't matter. He stopped asking for second chances because he didn't see me as someone he could lose. Just someone who'd always be there, cleaning up his image while he did whatever he wanted. I left, and within hours he posted a selfie with a caption about cutting off negativity. That was his final talent, turning my boundaries into his storyline. Story 30. I gave Theo second chances because he always sounded so reasonable. He'd lie, then explain it. He'd cancel, then justify it. He'd hurt me, then logically break down why my reaction was the real problem. Every apology came with a lecture. "I'm sorry you felt that way." The first chance was after I caught him texting his ex at midnight. "We're just friends," he said. "You're being insecure." The second was after he spent our anniversary working late. I later learned he was at dinner. Guess with who? When I confronted him the third time, I didn't accuse. I asked, "Why do you keep doing this to me?" He stared at me and said, "Because you keep letting me." It felt like a slap. I said, "So you're not even going to ask for another chance?" He leaned back and replied, "Why would I? You're still here." That's when I realized he stopped asking for second chances because he'd already won the game. He didn't need to beg. He'd convinced himself I was the kind of girl who'd endure anything as long as he sounded calm while doing it. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. He called after me, not panicked, irritated. "You're really going to throw away years over a few mistakes?" I turned and said, "They weren't mistakes. They were choices." And for the first time, he had nothing to say. Story 31. I gave Noah second chances because he was the king of almost. Almost faithful, almost honest, almost ready to be a partner. We were long distance for a year. Every time he went quiet for a night, he'd blame bad signal, dead battery, falling asleep early. I tried to be chill because I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend who ruins a good thing. Then a girl tagged him in a story at 2 a.m. Hotel mirror selfie. 2 toothbrushes in the sink behind them. I stared at it until my eyes burned. I called him. He answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed like I'd woken him up from something important. "What?" I didn't even accuse. I just said, "Tell me where you are." Silence. Then, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Because I saw the story." He exhaled. Bored, not scared. "It's not what you think." I waited for the begging, for the panic, for him to say, "Please don't leave, I'll fix it." Instead, he said, "Look, if you can't handle distance, that's on you, on me." That's when I realized he stopped asking for second chances months ago. The distance gave him an excuse to live 2 lives, and my forgiveness had become a built-in feature. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was annoyed, I noticed. I hung up and blocked him. 10 minutes later, he texted from a new number. "You're being dramatic." And that's how I knew I'd made the right choice. Because even caught red-handed, he still wanted me to feel guilty for bleeding. Story 32. I stayed with Ben through his recovery era. That's what everyone called it. Like it was a trendy phase, not something that was swallowing me whole. He'd promise he was done drinking. Then I'd find bottles hidden behind the laundry detergent. He'd swear it was the last time. He'd cry, hold my face, say, "Please." Don't give up on me. I need you. So I became the person who counted his days sober, who searched his breath when he kissed me, who memorized the look in his eyes when he lied. One night we were supposed to meet my parents for dinner. He was in the shower, and his phone buzzed on the counter. A text popped up from his friend. Got you the usual. Same spot. I felt my stomach drop. When he came out, I asked quietly, where were you this afternoon? He didn't even blink. At the gym. I held up the phone. Try again. For a second, I saw the old Ben, the one who used to beg. But then his face hardened, like he was tired of the role. He snapped, I'm not doing this interrogation thing. You're not my warden, I whispered. I'm trying to save you. He laughed once, bitter. Save yourself. That was the moment he stopped asking for second chances. When he decided the problem wasn't his drinking, it was my refusal to ignore it. He grabbed his keys and said, if you can't handle me at my worst, leave. And I realized he wasn't asking me to love him. He was asking me to enable him. So I let him go, finally, because he'd already chosen the bottle over the begging. Story 33. I gave Derek second chances because our church kept telling me, love is patient. Derek wasn't openly cruel. He was subtle. He'd talk over me in groups, then squeeze my hand like it was affection. He'd criticize my clothes, my laugh, my friends, always framed as concern. If I got upset, he'd say, I'm just trying to lead you. The first chance was after I caught him DMing a girl from the youth group. He cried in the parking lot and told me Satan was tempting him. I believed him because I wanted to believe the best. The second chance came when he lied about money, spent our savings on something he called an investment. He apologized with a Bible verse and a promise. Then he proposed, not because we were good, because he could tell I was slipping away. The ring was beautiful. Everyone screamed. Cameras flashed. And for one night, I felt trapped inside a happy ending. Later, alone, I asked, why now? He smiled and said, because you need stability. I said, do you love me or do you love controlling me? His smile vanished. Don't start. I waited for him to soften, to beg like before. Instead, he said, cold and calm, if you embarrass me by calling off an engagement, don't expect me to chase you. That's when he stopped asking for second chances, when the relationship became a public contract. He didn't need to plead. He had an audience, expectations, a ring like a leash. I took it off and placed it on the table. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He only said, you'll regret this. But walking out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, free. Like patience wasn't love anymore, just a cage I'd finally unlocked. Story 34. I gave Liam second chances because we owned a business together. It's hard to leave someone when your paycheck has their name on it. He'd flirt with customers, then call it marketing. He'd cancel our plans because the business comes first. He'd forget anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, then throw money at me like a tip. When I complained, he'd say, you want romance? Go date a waiter. The first time I tried to break up, he begged, full-on tears. Please don't ruin everything. We're a team. So I stayed, because the business was my baby too. Then one day, I found a draft email on the shared laptop. It was to our landlord, Liam trying to put the lease solely in his name. No warning, no conversation, just quietly cutting me out. I confronted him, hands shaking. What is this? He didn't even pretend to be sorry. He just stared at me and said, it's business. I said, so you were going to trap me until you could replace me? He shrugged. You're being emotional. I waited for the old begging, for him to say he didn't mean it, that he loved me, that he needed me. Instead, he leaned back and said, if you don't like it, you can leave. That was the moment he stopped asking for second chances, when he thought he'd cornered me, emotionally and financially. He didn't need my forgiveness if he could hold my livelihood hostage. So I did the only thing he didn't expect. I left anyway. I called a lawyer. I gathered proof. I rebuilt from scratch. And when he finally realized he couldn't bully me into staying, that's when he started begging again. Too late, because by then, his team speech sounded like a scam.